Okay, so we're back here looking at more basic modify commands in AutoCAD. This is the second part. The first part of the video covered the move, copy, rotate, mirror, trim, extend, and erase commands. This video is going to cover the rest of them here in the modify command section, which is going to be the fillet and chamfer. It's going to be the explode, stretch, scale, array, and offset. So we're going to look at these other modify commands. Let's start with the offset command first. So it looks like the double C shape here. This offset commands allows you to be able to offset lines one side or the other, or circles or other shapes. So if I click on that, the first thing it says is specify the offset distance. This is how far you want it to step either out or inward. So let's say that I want to offset it at 0.5 inches. So I type in 0.5 on my keypad and hit enter. It says what item do you want to offset. So let's say we want to offset this rectangle, and then I simply click on which side of that line that I want to offset it to. So it's highlighting here in blue the item that's being offset, and then whichever side I move my cursor to in relation to that blue line is which one it's going to offset to. So let's say that I want to offset now a bunch of boxes inward at exactly ½ inch. So I'm going to click in, and it's offset that line. I can go right back into it. I'm still in the offset command by simply clicking on the next line and then deciding. Notice in this case I've selected that blue line. If I go inward, it shows me another offset inward. If I go out of that blue line, it goes away and it disappears. And the reason is that blue box from that white box going around it is exactly ½ inch. So whenever it overlaps, it just does not show up. It would, however, give me multiple copies there if I were to offset it outward. So you don't want to do that. You only want to have one line for each aspect needed. So I'm going to click in, select the box, click in, select the box, click in, and I can offset these quickly and easily to make them look good. Now notice I can't go inside anymore. The reason is there's not enough room inside that box to put another one offset. And that works for, let's say for example, there's a octagon shape. We have some sort of circle in here. We could offset that circle, could offset that ellipse. We can do various shapes. So that's the offset command there. The next one I want to talk about, I'm going to hit escape to get out of that command. And then the next command I want to talk about is your fillet and your chamfer command. So that looks like it's spelt fillet. Fillet is what you eat whenever you're eating catfish. For a catfish fillet in AutoCAD, we call it fillet, and it's a filleted edge, or that rounded edge. We're also going to talk about chamfered edges, which are there's a break in the edge. It's not a hard 90-degree corner, but it puts angles, so they're using flat lines here rather than rounding out corners like a fillet would. So it's a broken corner, if you will, with a flat edge on it. That's what a chamfer is. So let's do fillets. So I'm going to click on fillet. It says select your first object. Now right down here on the command line, if I hit F2 on my keyboard, it brings this up. And by default in AutoCAD, generally the default size for a fillet or a chamfer is a radius of 0. That's really nice if you want to, let's say, close a couple of lines. So let's say, we'll get a clean screen here. And so let's say that I have a couple of lines like this, and if I want to make these into a corner, I can simply go into my fillet command, select line 1 and line 2, and it connects those with a hard corner. And the reason is because there was no radius put in. If I go back in my fillet command and instead change the radius, notice down here in the command line, it gives me the word radius with a little hand where I can click on that. It also highlights a blue letter R, which would allow me to hit R on my keyboard and change the radius that way too. So there are a couple different ways you can change that radius size. I'll just simply click on it, and now instead of the 0.000 size, I'm going to type in, let's say, a 1-inch radius. So I'm going to hit 1, and I'm going to hit enter. So now it's set that filleted radius to 1 inch, and I can click on these two lines and see how it shows me what it's going to look like before it actually rounds that out. And so I can do that, say this rectangle here, I can do that, and whenever you go back into that fillet command F2 here, it brings back the previous radius that you put in. So it defaults to 1, and it allows you to be able to click a whole bunch of them at once. When it enters that in, or when you select those 2 lines and it makes that filleted edge, it gets out of the command. A space bar or enter or re-clicking that icon goes right back into it. So space bar, and I can round those out pretty quickly. So that's the radius command, or sorry, not radius, the fillet command. The chamfer command, like I said, is similar, but it has a flat edge. So I select on chamfer. The same deal. If I hit F2 and bring this up, the distance is zeroed out. So distance 1 and distance 2 is 0 and 0. So if I want, let's say, to chamfer these edges here, and let's say that I want to do a chamfer, I want to change the distance, so I'm going to hit either D for distance, which is the blue text, or I'm going to click on that. In this case, I'll hit D because in the fillet command I clicked on it, so I'm just showing you both ways. Enter that in. So I hit D and enter, and it says what is the first chamfer distance. So let's say I want 1 inch for the first chamfer, so I hit enter, and it says specify the second chamfer distance. It defaults to the same size as the first chamfer distance, but let's say that this time I want it to be 3 for my second distance. So I type in 3 and hit enter, and it says, okay, what do you want to chamfer? So now pay attention to whenever I click these. So my first one that I'm going to click, which I put in the first distance was 1. So let's say that I want this one is my first edge, and now I'm going to put in my second edge. Notice here distance 1 is shown with the first line I click. Distance 2 is shown with the second line I click. So if I click that, this was the 3 inches long, where this was just the inch long. So I go back in my chamfer, I'm going to change my distance, let's say to 2, and I want my second distance 2, and that allows me to be able to make a quick and easy chamfered edge exactly 2 inches long vertical, 2 inches long horizontal. So that's another feature there, another modify command. So we've talked we've talked offsets, fillets, and chamfers. Now let's talk this next one, which is the explode command. So if I hover my mouse over the explode, it breaks up components that are joined together. So this goes for polygons, 8, yeah, circumscribes fine. This would go for rectangles. This would go for polylines. If we had multiple polylines where whenever you select on it, they're all joined together. Each one of these, they're all joined together. If you needed, let's say for example, this box or rectangle, and you needed to delete, let's say, 1 line on it, you simply hit your explode command and you select on that box and hit enter, and now it explodes it into 1 line. So I could delete that line out. Or for my octagon, I could hit explode and explode that out, and now that 1 line I can erase. Same for the polygon, and now I can erase that 1 line. So that's the explode command. Stretch command. Let's talk stretch command next. So the stretch command allows you to be able to stretch an item, making it longer or shorter, or stretch parts of an item to make it longer or shorter. So if I click on stretch, let's say that I want this rectangle, the back end here, I want it to stretch it out, 20 inches. So I select, notice I window just around the section I want to stretch, which is this back portion. Then I hit enter. It says specify your base point. You can click anywhere. If I want to go 20 inches out, I'm going to click up here. Notice it's going diagonally. I want to lock that in, so the F8 will get your ortho locked in, and I can type in 20 for the distance, and now it's stretched it from where it was 20 inches out. So that's the stretch command. If I wanted to stretch just this corner, I can do that. I can stretch just that corner by windowing just that corner, hitting enter. It says specify the base point, so I could pick, and you can do a locational point, like if I want to click it from here over, I'm going to turn my F8 off, which is my ortho, and it allows me to stretch just that corner. So I could literally stretch that corner from up here all the way down, let's say, to the midpoint of that line, and now it's stretched that up. So that is the stretch command. Stretch command is great if you have, let's say, for example, a house, and let's offset, I don't know, 1 inch. So let's say that you designed this house, and here's the Here's the floor plan. If you wanted to stretch that and make that longer, you could stretch that out and make that longer, shorter, and so forth. So that's really a handy feature. The next one here is scale, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It just simply makes an object or objects larger or smaller. So let's say that I have this rectangular shape here and I want to make it half that size. It's too big. I'm going to simply select my scale command. I'm going to select these. You can window around the whole thing. Notice that this way you window with the blue window. If I go backwards, it's green and dashed window. Green dashed means everything it touches will be selected. The blue solid is everything inside that box will be selected. But let's say I want to make these two boxes half the size. I select all my items. I hit enter or spacebar. It says specify the base point. So let's say that the base point is this corner. Now, if I were to simply start dragging this mouse around, notice it's going bigger, smaller, based on where I drag my mouse. If I want that half the size, I need to type in 0.5 because 0.5 is half, and it made it half the size. Okay, so that is the scale command. So if I want, let's say that this is still too large, so I select it, I hit enter, it says base point about this point, and notice I could drag my mouse, and if I drag my mouse way out, or if I zoom way in here, I could drag this mouse way in and it'd be super small. So I could click in there. Let's say that I wanted it a quarter of the size that it was after I scaled it that second time. So I'm going to type in 0.25, and now it's a quarter of the size. Let's say that that's too big. I need to make it twice that size. I would select that, hit enter, find a base point, and then I would type in 2 if I wanted it twice the size. And so that allows you some features there with scale. So these are some other of the main modify commands. The one last one I'm going to talk about, I'll do that in a different video. So these main modify commands you use a lot in drafting, in 2D drafting in particular, and hope that answers some of your questions.